Hello, World Economic News for Thursday. A lot to get through. You might have to use the pause button if you're interested to look at the charts, but let's get on. First chart there is total non-agricultural employment by district, and the districts are the Fed areas, the Fed district. You can recognize them: Dallas, Kansas City, Minneapolis, down to New York and Boston. And this is employment. This is why the Dallas Fed man says, oh, you can stop QE, we don't need it in Dallas. But New York, Boston, Cleveland, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, etc. could rather do with it because employment isn't quite as happy there as it is in Dallas. Interesting chart, actually. Employment and how it is increasing from its initial zeroed number, which is 100. Dallas are quite proud of the fact that they are good at getting employment because of their business-friendly policies. It's got a lot more to it than that. But still, let's move on. The BLS, JOLTS, job openings and employment, to see how the United States is doing. This goes back 10 years, and these are job openings. Employment's there as well, but job openings, this is particularly. And it's a good one to follow. I don't think it's messed with. And you can see that it dived down to the end of the recession, but is clawing its way back up. But it's clawing its way back up pitifully, slowly. Wall Street Journal asks, why aren't employers hiring? And this is a typical economist sort of question. They don't understand that employers have got minds, and minds are affected by gut instinct. Gut instinct has got an awful lot to do with whether employers employ or not. And their gut instinct, I believe, in the United States at the moment, especially of the smaller employers, is I don't feel confident. And that's quite enough not to employ. New York Times, Obama wants jobless aid help for states. This is so confusing. Basically, he's going to kick the can down the road for the money that the states technically owe Washington, but says that I'll demand it all back in 2014 in a big lump or something like that. But they won't do it. And I think we're seeing at the moment is the United States leading, where a lot will follow. Taxes will be systematically reduced and reduced and reduced. Basically, it's MMT by the back door, but they won't understand it, and they'll just realise that they can never reintroduce the taxes that these temporary tax cuts have cut. I don't think we'll ever see the taxes go up again. Ever? It's a long time. But yeah, effectively ever. IndianExpress.com. Yes. New Delhi. A high farm output on top of abundant rainfall has helped the Indian economy grow by an estimated 8.6% in 2010-11 against 8% a year ago. But high inflation remains a dampener. And they probably wouldn't even see the irony of saying inflation remains a dampener when saying high farm output on top of abundant rainfall has helped Indian growth. But there we are. They've had high rainfall, but just enough to give them good sales of the wheat and rice that they have in abundance. New York Times Global Business, UN Food Agency issues warning on China drought, where India's got mostly too much rain, but it's growing the crops. China hasn't got what they want, and it's a 60-year record sort of amount that they haven't got. Hong Kong, this is writing the same article about China. The United Nations Food Agency issued an alert on Tuesday warning that severe drought was threatening the wheat crop in China, the world's largest wheat producer, and resulting in shortages of drinking water for people and livestock. And when you got drinking water problems, then you certainly know that you've got crop irrigation problems. China has been essentially self-sufficient in grain for decades. For national security reasons, any move by China to import large quantities of food in response to the drought could drive international prices even higher than the record levels recently reached. No doubt they will. And the little chart in multimedia there is the next chart to open up, the world's largest crops, and we run along first with rice. By far the biggest producer is China, then India and Indonesia. Basically the eastern people grow all the rice, but China's by far the biggest. Wheat, by far the biggest, China, then India, Russia, and then the United States. The United States being about half the wheat production of China. So if China gets very droughted and runs short of wheat, the world runs short of wheat. Along there, the last one is corn, where the United States grows basically all of it, but China is in second place there. But what does the United States do with all that corn, for goodness sake? Well, I don't know. Anyway, China, wheat, drought, problem. Business Insider asks, is India or China the next economic superpower? China is growing fast, but with its dependence on foreign investment, could it survive if other economies lose steam? In other words, can we buy their shit, man? India is more self-sustained, but it is tackling rampant corruption and soaring inflation, which they will not have what it takes to get on top of and conquer. Forex Yard gives us, this is Japan, and I'm pushing it, but I believe it's important. Tokyo, investors are likely to start pulling money from Japanese assets if government fails to act quickly to reform its tattered finances, the head of Japan Credit Rating Agency said on Tuesday. We had somebody yesterday saying it. This is another geezer. Japan fiscal situation is far worse than those of Greece, Spain and Ireland, which have been attacked most heavily by the markets. If nothing is done, Japan may become a target of investors who want to avoid risk. The government cannot afford to delay taking steps on fiscal reform. Exactly what the other guy said yesterday, and what I say is the same again. They won't make the reform because they're a bit like the investors. The investors have been attacking Japan, making big bets that Japan are going to fall because of their fiscal problems, but they never do. It just seems to stagger on. So the Japanese government and central bank are happy to stagger on, and the investors or the market people are now a bit wary about shorting Japan because it always seems to be able to stagger on, but one day it won't stagger on. Straits Times, Thailand imposes tough security law ahead of protests. The yellow shirts are on the streets again. They changed the government by protesting only months ago, but they're already unhappy with the government and want a new one. This is a bit of a tatty little chart, but it gives us an idea. It's global property, but it's year-to-date returns by region. And you see everybody's positive, but the biggest one is a very big negative, so it must be some sort of smoke based on some sort of fire. And it's Latin America. Housing, property prices well down. Something strange going on there. Here's a run on Ireland from the Financial Times Alphaville. First one is Bank of Ireland refuses to go quietly. Bank of Ireland's got to get a whole load of a couple of billion together by a certain time from the private market, and it's not doing it, but it's really trying to do it. And if it can't do it, obviously the government will have to come in again and do some more bailing out. Financial Times again on Ireland's secret liquidity is unbelievably cheap. The ECB and the Irish Central Bank are getting very, very cheap money to the banks. Bit naughty, really. The next one is the missing bits from Merrill's Ireland note. The special I did on Ireland about Michael Lewis's Vanity Fair article, and the Merrill Lynch worker Philip Ingram, who wrote the piece to say that Ireland's banks are completely out of control and then got squashed. They've been struggling over the last 3 days to find the initial document that he released before it was pulled in and squashed, and they've actually got it there now. So if you follow the link, you can read the whole piece. Good work by FT Alphaville. Bloomberg, Danish banks face consolidation wave after bondholder losses. Denmark is quietly trying to get its act together, but it's really struggling because it took a hell of a sideswipe in the credit crunch time, and its banks are still rocking and rolling, as in, makes it go fuzzy. Yeah, but that's what the Danish banks are, fuzzy at the moment. Guardian Co. UK, WikiLeaks cables Saudi Arabia cannot pump enough oil to keep a lid on prices. US diplomat convinced by Saudi expert that reserves of world's biggest oil exporter have been overstated by nearly 40%. Overstating of the reserves has been known for decades, and it's totally irrelevant. From the article we get 7 months later, the US Embassy in Riyadh went further in 2 more cables. Our mission now questions how much the Saudis can now substantively influence the crude markets over the long term. Clearly they can drive prices up, but we question whether they any longer have the power to drive prices down for a prolonged period. In other words, they can drive prices up by saying, nope, you can't have any oil, we're going to put it in a big bucket somewhere. But they can't flood the world with more oil if there's a shortage or if the price goes up. So they'd flood what they'd meant to have been doing. They'd always come in and give more oil into the market to make the price go down. And they're basically saying, well, don't think they've got it anymore. And the last paragraph of the article, Jeremy Leggett, convener of the UK Industry Task Force on peak oil and energy security, said, "We are asleep at the wheel here, choosing to ignore a threat to global economy that is quite as bad as the credit crunch, quite possibly worse." And that's what we think it might be, actually, running out of energy, quite possibly worse. That's it. Bye.